All right, I'm trying this on YouTube Live for the first time on my phone. Um, I won't get into why I'm not on Instagram right now, but it's an experiment and hopefully it works. Um, so I'll just sort of roll along because I don't think anybody's actually going to be able to join because a lot of people who join on Instagram don't are probably not going to join on YouTube. So, but I'll sort of do my thing anyway and pray that it actually. So I wanted to preface this. So the title is Soul Justice: Gifts for Fear and Madness. I'm going to show you a somatic technique. It's definitely not a Western somatic technique, but it isn't from any particular lineage either. It's just what I've learned along the way. And I think we need it. We need it precisely because of the fear-mongering propaganda that is happening everywhere, based on you know what. You know what and you know who. And yes, this is absolutely about how fascism hides in supremacy of certain racial and ethnic supremacies and uses the same tactics. And those tactics work because they're based in fear and threat. And because they're based in fear and threat, they trigger people's fragility. So whenever your own fragility is triggered, you have to understand that is when you are a prime puppet for fascism in whatever form it takes. And some people are triggering their own fragility all the time because they know they can use it for their own agendas. So fragility is not necessarily a racial thing, but it has and continues to be weaponized racially. What we have to understand is that whiteness is a state of mind that is rooted in anti-blackness, and that anyone can subscribe to whiteness and join the club. And that gives them a certain privilege. You can even claim that you are not white and be an agent of white supremacy and use words to mean things that you want them to mean rather than what they might actually mean. So language is the weapon of the colonizer because they decide to steal language and turn it into their own in-joke, their own dog whistles, to mean different things. For instance, the word woke now means the N-word, the derogatory word against black people. That's what woke means now when many white people say it, including the woke agenda, wokeists, wokeisms, those woke Gen Z. They are actually meaning the N-word. This is also now happening when we talk about the state of Israel, the nation state of Israel, the Zionists, and those fascists who are hiding behind Judaism. It can mean lots of things to lots of other people too, but we have to understand that those with the most money, power, capital, resources, agenda will always have a stronger platform on some level, especially on these platforms, to decide for us what words actually mean. Just like they are now banning language to call it anti-Semitic, they're just deciding that it's anti-Semitic based on their own fear hallucination. This is happening across the board. This is happening with individuals, with groups. They are deciding what words mean for us, and then policing us and oppressing us based on what they have decided those words mean. So I'm going to try to give you an exercise now to combat your own fear and fragility response. Knowing that, for many people, they do not have the prerequisite skills to really understand the depths of what I'm going to say and what I'm going to show you. But you have to start somewhere. And I think that the tools that I use and that I'm going to show you, they will help you eventually clear out your perception, decolonize your perception. So it's the gifts that keep on giving that are the most useful practices to do, because you can practice them as a beginner, and you can practice them intermediate, and you can practice them as an advanced person, and they still derive benefits. They still give you benefits. You just practice them differently based on your skill level, based on your experience, and based on your exposure to various indigenous technologies and protocols and wisdom teachings. And you and others can always weaponize something, and that's the risk that I always take when I show things for free on the internet. The risk is always that people will misuse them or use them in a capitalist way on themselves and others and try to join the club of whiteness by using tools that they decide are for the white gaze or for the white body. They're not. But if you have a body, you can disown the whiteness around that body and inside that body, and you can become a human being again. So I'm going to show some exercises, then I'm going to read some poetry. And that'll be it for today. So, I'm going to show you, but you don't have to do it like me. It's just, I need to fit in the screen. So, I'm going to use my own hand, my own wrist, to show you this. And I'm going to explain it as I go. Understand that I wouldn't be explaining it when I was doing it. So it's already slightly different, right? So I'm going to tune in to wherever I feel fear or anxiety in my body, first of all. And that could be a small fear, large fear, anxiety, fear, whatever. It could be about anything, doesn't really matter. The point is, you feel some kind of fear or anxiety in your body about something, about some kind of worrisome threat, some kind of impending doom, some kind of fear or worry about the future or the past. And you notice where that is in your body. For me, I'm noticing it in my solar plexus and my sternum, maybe somewhere in my heart, and in various other places in the body too, the kidneys. But for the sake of this, just kind of see that all as one thing or feel that all as like one feeling. You don't have to subdivide it. You don't have to have a story for it. It's just very basic. So you feel that. Okay, great. So now you know where that is. Then notice if this increases how fragile you would become, right? So you're imagining, oh, right, if this gets worse, I'll become very fragile. I won't be able to make choices. I won't be able to see things clearly. I won't be able to make rational or safe decisions in any way. I will just be at the mercy of this fear or panic or anxiety. You can imagine that without going into it. Just know, oh, right, if this increased by double or triple, I would be very fragile. I would act in a fragile way, and that fragility would cause harm to myself and others because I would make bad choices under the influence of that intensity of that phenomenon, right? So you see your limit. You kind of just notice, right, I have a limit. If this gets really bad, I'm going to become an agent of empire. I'm just going to do bad things because that's the way biology works sometimes. Okay, so that's the prerequisite. Now comes the exercise. You can take a body part, wherever you're at, and start slowly. You're going to start moving around to notice what feels good. It doesn't have to be great. It can be pressure, but start slow and gentle. so that you don't skip over anything that might be useful. So you have to find it. Earlier today, there was this point on my wrist that felt really good, but I'm not there anymore. So that place isn't doing the same thing it was 2, 3 hours ago. So I have to find it. And so I'm doing this in real time with you. I have to find what feels good. And I can't predict what that is and how that looks or anything. So I found a spot where I'm massaging and I'm letting my hands just slowly feel that. Okay? So I'm going to do this for a little bit of time. I'm going to indulge in the enjoyment of finding the right spot, the right pressure, the right texture, the right movement, right? There's all these little ways that we can find pleasure, and we don't know what that is yet. So I'm still moving around, right? And when the breathing changes, I let that happen. If confusion happens, I let that happen too. But I'm primarily trying to provide some kind of relief, some kind of pleasurable feeling that is about paying attention and using just this part of my body because that's what's on camera. And I think it's useful to just know that you can do it right now wherever you're at. You know, you have access to this probably, so you could just find it. You don't have to go do anything big and drastic. Here's where the second big part of the exercise comes in. You're going to keep doing this. You're going to keep doing this, feeling good, searching for feeling good. And you're going to allow that to sort of build up some chi in your system, as if you are really thirsty and you're finally getting to drink some good, fresh, clean water. So now you're building the pleasure slowly, as if you can kind of store it up in your system. You're really paying, you have to use your attention to do this. And if the place doesn't feel good anymore, you have to move around. You have to do something else. So you keep finding the place that feels good. And you build up the charge. And then the third part of the exercise is you intend strongly that the thing that you're now doing, the pleasure that you're now feeling, is for others. Okay? This is how I do it. You can find your own way to do it, but I will sort of show you what that's like. I'm not stopping the feeling good process that I'm doing on my hands. I'm not stopping it to pray. I'm continuing it as I pray. And I imagine that there is a chorus of allies behind me, a Greek chorus kind of vibe. I don't need to know who they are. They're just imaginary helpers, and they are praying on my behalf. And they are saying things like, may all beings who can't feel this way now. May all beings feel pleasure who cannot or will not or are not able to feel pleasure right now. And they are doing that strongly in an interesting and poetic way behind me so that I can continue just feeling the energy and feeling the good feeling, knowing that now there's this secondary intention moving the energy outward on my behalf for the behalf of others. It's very important because we're not going into selfishness. We have to eradicate selfishness through a process of also getting our own needs met. So, to reiterate, I'm finding a place in my body that feels good. I'm using my senses and my attention to keep moving around to what feels good. I'm changing texture, I'm changing pressure, just so I can feel different things that feel good. I have a Greek chorus behind me praying that this is for those people that cannot feel good right now. And this doesn't mean only in the present moment. This could mean in the future or the past, but don't get too conceptual about it. Just allow this energy to move through you and then out, but you're not losing anything. So the fragility response that we're trying to combat here is the feeling of loss. The feeling that you will lose something that you want or need, and that is the root of fascism and fear. The fear-based fascism and fragility that we are seeing everywhere is also in us. It's in me too. The fear of loss. So we are learning to understand that we can have something nice and also give it away without losing anything. And we're practicing that in a slow, mindful, embodied way, in a small ritual action. That's a very important term, a ritual action that you can do when you start to feel overwhelmed, stressed out, threatened, anxious, etc. Is that you stop and you find pleasure. You grow that pleasure inside your system, not through more intensity, but just through intention. And then you have allies or imaginary forces that are praying behind you, and they're praying that this is useful for other beings. May all beings have pleasure now. May all beings feel this good feeling who cannot feel good right now for whatever reason in their situation. May this exercise, this ritual action that I'm doing, help those people too. That is the very important part, and that is the part that is completely left out by 99% of all Western supposed somatics, is that there's no ritual action, there's just greed. Greed, pleasure, greed. And we have to both have our ability to feel pleasure at any time, and you let that pleasure not be a success for narcissism. Okay, we have to understand that. We have to understand that we are hardwired in some cases culturally to be selfish little narcissists who want to hoard everything. And what we have to learn is the opposite of hoarding, which is the opposite of fascism. Whenever you feel like you're ready to stop, just take a moment, gather yourself together, do whatever you need to do, and just take a few deep breaths, knowing that you could return to this practice anytime, because it's very simple, it's very basic, it's very kind, it's very gentle. You don't need to expend a lot of energy to do it, but it trains your attention and it trains your intention through a kind of non-Western ritual somatic action that then you can bring into every other part of your life. I don't have a name for this practice because it doesn't really need a name. It's more about the principles and the context and the intentions of how we do the method. Okay? The view is much more important than the method. Okay? So, rewatch this video again, take notes if you need to, have a recap, but understand that that is so basic, and yet nobody's talking about it. Okay? Because it's not actually just for you. It's not self-regulation. Do you understand? It's not self-regulation. It's something way beyond this idea of soothing. It's way beyond just that. Of course it involves or includes soothing. Of course it does. Because anything that is done in such a manner will provide some kind of soothing benefit. But it does not stop there, and it is not focused there. It is a sequence or a series or a constellation of ritual actions that combined produce a concentrated effect that then trains the nervous system towards a different orientation, a different worldview, a different relational ontology. Okay? I know those are big words, but you can handle it. So now I'm going to read some poetry just to be done with today's thing and see how the video uploads. I'm going to read a few poets that I've selected. Today they just all happen to be men, but I will, change that in the future. I'm trying to go through my poetry collection and kind of curate it, and that just takes a long time. So I'm going to read a few poets, and then I'm going to read a poem that I wrote. I believe it was Monday in a class that I took. Okay, so let's go through that. So the first is N. Scott Malmaday, a Native American poet. And I'm going to read just a small excerpt, which isn't a full poem, but it's a little essay in the introduction that he wrote. Okay. He says, in the middle of this whole introduction, he says, "Words are names. To write a poem is to practice a naming ceremony. These figures moving in my rhyme, who are they? Death and death's dog, time. And to confer a name is to confer being. We perceive existence by means of words and names. To this or that vague potential thing I will give a name, and it will exist thereafter, and its existence will be clearly perceived. The name enables me to see it. I can call it by its name, and I can see it for what it is. The poet says, 'Here, let me show you something.' That is, let me help you to see something as you have not seen it before." Good introduction to what language can do when we do it the right way. The next poem I will read is from John Trudell, another Native American poet. Where's this poem? It's called Endure. The people cry out, tears of anger, tears of sorrow flowing, giving birth to resistance, young ones to remember struggle. For the people cry out, tears of happiness, tears of joy, washing the pain, cleaning the spirit, giving strength. The generations, remembering the past to rebuild the future, for weeping is another way of laughing, and resisting and outlasting the enemy. I'll read that last part again because I messed up. The generations, remembering the past to rebuild the future, for weeping is another way of laughing and resisting and outlasting the enemy. Then I will read some translated Chinese poetry by David Hinton is the translator. And I will read some of his translated poetry, which is the famous Lao Tzu from the Tao Te Ching. But I think that it's useful to read it as poetry rather than some kind of quasi-religious text. I'll read a few of these just because it's good to read them. A few of them. A few of these. Those who know don't talk, and those who talk don't know. Block the senses and close the mind. Blunt edges, loosen tangles, soften glare, mingle dust. This is called dark enigma union. It can't be embraced, and it can't be ignored, can't be enhanced, and can't be harmed, can't be treasured, and can't be despised, for it's the treasure of all beneath heaven. You may govern the nation through principle and lead armies to victory through craft, but you win all beneath heaven through indifference. How can I know this to be so? Through this. The more prohibitions rule all beneath heaven, the deeper poverty grows among the people. The more shrewd leaders there are, the faster dark confusion fills the nation. The more cleverness people learn, the faster strange things happen. The faster laws and decrees are issued, the more bandits and thieves appear. Therefore a sage says, I do nothing, and the people transform themselves. I cherish tranquility, and the people rectify themselves. I cultivate indifference, and the people enrich themselves. I desire nothing, and the people return of themselves to uncarved simplicity. Last one. Let nations grow smaller and smaller, and people fewer and fewer. Let weapons become rare and superfluous. Let people feel death's gravity again, and never wander far from home. Then boat and carriage will sit unused, and shield and sword lie unnoticed. Let people knot ropes for notation again, and never need anything more. Let them find pleasure in their food, and beauty in their clothes, peace in their homes, and joy in their ancestral ways. Then people in neighboring nations will look across to each other, their chickens and dogs calling back and forth. And yet they'll grow old and die without bothering to exchange visits. And for the last thing, I'll read the poem that I wrote yesterday, a work in progress. It's called Ars Poetica 2024. Ars Poetica is a poetic form. It's essentially a poem about poetry, or a writing about writing, about why the writer writes, why the poet makes poetry. Give me a second here. Digesting. Okay. And this is written by me, obviously. I have to say that, but... In another world with other rules, none of this needs to be said, because in that place deception cannot deceive. There is no denial, no hypocrisy, no dishonesty, and therefore no stories, no narratives, and no relative truth. In this other world, causes and effects do not exist, and thus no reference points of past and or future temporarily disable spirit's capacity to generate and instantaneously receive grace. This world is not and can never be perfect precisely because the concept of imperfection does not exist, and the causes of perfection also do not exist as preliminary conditions supporting an experience that might be described as luminous, inclusive wholeness. In that other world, there is no writing, no stories, nor thoughts, or anything that might be construed as abstraction, concept, or idea. No inspiration exists. Nothing is ever uninspired. No murder, no genocide, since no one can be murdered, no land can be stolen, no body enslaved nor oppressed. So there is no reason to write this there, except as a joke that lies there in the space, ununderstood. Like how no one can understand what is happening here, in this world. Children inside out, impossible hungers that can't be filled or satisfied. Indoctrination and the marketing of violence as power. The end. Hopefully this is beneficial. I'll leave it at that for today. Blessings.